I have a confession. I like The Ranch on Netflix. I know what you're thinking. It's a generic sitcom. It has a laugh track, it's on sets, it looks cheap. But at the heart is actually a really interesting show. What I really like about The Ranch is the fact that it's about cattle ranchers. It's an interesting concept for a television show. It's a sort of person you don't see on TV very often. The show is essentially about a typical cattle farm going through economic disparity, struggling to survive. It has a lot of generic aspects to it, but one of the things I really, really like about the show is the fact that it handles all of that material with a level of maturity and honesty. There's a sort of earnestness to the show that really, really makes it just so profoundly unique. You say what you will about Ashton Kutcher, I think he does exactly what you'd expect him to do. He finds a role here that works for him. He plays a dumb cattle rancher, sort of playboy ex-football pro, and that it fits, it works. And Danny Masterson pretty much just plays Hyde from that 70s show, but that also works because that humor is very necessary to drive the show forward. Probably the most intriguing aspect about this is Deborah Winger and Sam Elliott, who are absolutely fantastic. And despite this show essentially being a maybe C grade level sitcom, it actually really works because of Sam Elliott and Deborah Winger. They just give such honest performances. I like the drama of the show. I like the comedy of the show. I think both work well. I think they work really well together. I think the sitcom tropes that are sort of, some might argue, plaguing it are actually a strength in some way, in that it makes the material less overly dramatic and a little more maybe true in sort of a weird way. It sort of comes off a little bit true. Flaws of the show. There are many. The primary one is probably the relationship between Ashton Kutcher's Colt and Alyssa Cuthbert's character, whose name is escaping me offhand. There's sort of this recurring thing throughout the series with her and him sort of dancing around whether they like each other. And again, it's a very TV trope kind of idea. But the problem is she's like with a guy, and you kind of like that relationship, and there's the back and forth. It's always just made me feel uncomfortable and made me feel weird. And I personally would have rather seen something a little less generic when it came to the arc of those characters. I really liked Alyssa Cuthbert on the show. I think she's fantastic on the show. I think almost everyone on the show is pretty damn good. Sam Elliott, I think, is the biggest standout. He essentially plays Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec on a cattle ranch, which is just refreshing and fun and delightful to see. There's another guy on the show who sort of seems like a hardened cowboy. His name is completely escaping me, but maybe I'll put it right here. He's also really good. He's only in a few episodes, but he's absolutely fantastic. He's hilarious. I laughed during every single moment. I just thought it was great. The show's not perfect. Of course it's not. And it's not necessarily great, but it does have some elements to it that make it interesting. And if you go into it, if you have a bias against Ashton Kutcher, you don't like the standard old style sort of 70s, 80s, 90s sitcom tropes, then you're probably not going to like it. But if you like that 70s show, you're a fan of Ashton Kutcher, you're a fan of Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation, or you're just looking for something a little bit different and interesting, this I think is a show that takes something very old and something very refreshing and combines them into a show that I think works. I think it works more than it fails. I like it. What can I say? I thought it was enjoyable. I found myself wanting to go back to it every single day. I didn't binge watch it though. I just watched one episode at a time, which really worked well for it. So I recommend doing that, and I recommend checking it out, but maybe not until after midnight. Midnight Confessions.